Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. There's a lot of uncertainty right now with the Cleveland Browns offseason, what the future of Myles Garrett is with this organization. Will the people in charge remain in charge after this offseason? Are the Browns headed for a full rebuild or not? What's the plan going to be, depending on some of the variables that have already unleashed themselves in this offseason? But the one thing we know for sure is that the Browns starting quarterback in week 1 will be different than their starting quarterback last year in week 1. That is a guaranteed fact. So what I want to do today is take every option that the Browns have as of recording this video, February 11th, 2025, and rank these options based on how I feel about what it would take to get these options, what you would sacrifice to get these options. So we got guys you could trade for, free agents, and you got people in the draft too, right? And I want everybody to remember, I'm not ranking this list based exclusively on how I feel about the quarterback's level of play. It's considering everything, right? If they're on another team right now, what would it cost to bring them to the Cleveland Browns? What sacrifice would you have to make? What's their cap hit going to be if you have to trade for them? If they're a free agent, how expensive are they going to be versus how much that's going to hurt you going forward? If they're a draft pick, considering where the Browns select, the risk of taking a quarterback that early. All of these things will be considered as we go through this list of quarterbacks. So let's jump to it. So the way I want to divide this list up, we have S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier. For something to qualify as S tier, to me, it has to have not just the potential for it to result in a franchise quarterback. It has to be likely that this is going to result in getting a franchise quarterback. We're talking about trading for somebody who is widely considered a franchise quarterback here. Spoiler warning, there's not going to be anybody in S tier. A tier options are quarterbacks who I think can legitimately solve your quarterback problem in the short term at the very least. And the value to get them does not project to be crazy, or the contract value that you would have to incur is not crazy. A B tier option is an option that you think could get through the season, and if you have enough around that option, you can win games with. A C tier option, to me, is a quarterback who is not expensive, you might get through the season with, and maybe there's some potential that you can slip this guy into B tier if they get a good enough season going. And then D tier option would be just another name on the back of the jersey, right? So think of D tier as F tier. I just didn't feel like adding the extra tier here and skipping the letter. So that is where we are. Let's start with somebody who's going to go in D tier. Trey Lance. Would be cheap. I could see people talking themselves into this potentially having some level of potential. But my issue with Trey Lance is very simple. Trey Lance, despite being a highly touted prospect coming out of his draft class, a good enough prospect to entice the San Francisco 49ers to spend 3 first-round picks to go get him, has not showed any level of development in his years in the NFL. He's been in the NFL long enough. He's been in 2 stable organizations and has not really made any progress. You can go ahead and sign Trey Lance. I think you would be wasting your time. I don't think Trey Lance has much to offer. I could be wrong there, but I would not be a fan of going after Trey Lance. Let's go ahead and go and get rid of Cooper Rush as well. Not as bad as an option as Trey Lance, but just super limited, right? Like a super limited quarterback. You're not seriously signing Cooper Rush thinking you're going to win a bunch of games. You're basically, if you start the season with Cooper Rush as your starting quarterback or Trey Lance as your starting quarterback, and remember, when I'm ranking these guys, I'm ranking them as starting quarterbacks, not just as like prospects or if I would like to have them on the bench or something. I think Trey Lance would be fine if you sign him to replace like DTR. I don't think he would be fine if you sign him to start. Same thing with Cooper Rush. I would like him as a backup, but not as a starter. Um, yeah, if you go into the season starting Cooper Rush, I don't really have much faith that the Browns are going to do anything other than compete for a top pick next year. Um, we could throw Mac Jones in here, right? I would throw Mac Jones. I would put Mac Jones a little bit above Cooper Rush here, because Mac Jones has had a good year in the NFL at least. Young enough player where you could believe he could have some upside, but still, I'm just not. I'm not at the place where I could be excited about Mac Jones playing for the Cleveland Browns. A really hard fall off after his rookie year. It doesn't seem like it's coming back. Had some extended time to play in Jacksonville. Was not very good in that time. I have no reason to believe that Mac Jones is going to be a solid option for you at quarterback. And it feels like if you start him, you're pretty much scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? Jimmy Garoppolo is similar to Mac Jones, even though Jimmy's had much more success in the NFL than Mac Jones. The problem with Jimmy is that, Jimmy is a couple of, well, not even a couple, like 3-4 years removed from his best playing days. And even in his best playing days, it's debatable whether he was as good as his win-loss record was. Jimmy's always been reliant on having top tier talent around him. He's had a ton of injuries, and he's not been a starter for what now, a couple of years. I think he got benched last year in Las Vegas. That didn't go well for him. And then he sat the bench here for the Rams as well. If you sign Jimmy Garoppolo to be your starter, nobody's going to be convinced that you're trying to win a ton of games this year. All right, let's go to C tier, right? So those are my D tier guys. If you sign them, I really have no faith that the season's going to be any good. C tier, just a little bit of faith that the season might, maybe you could catch a surprise here or there. But again, still not a great place to be in, right? C and D, not great tiers to be in. Let's put Kyle Trask here because Kyle Trask is super unproven. He is a former second round pick. People were high on him coming out of Florida, but he hasn't played. He got beat out by Baker Mayfield a couple years ago and has not gotten the opportunity to play since, was backing up Tom Brady. So good reason why he didn't play, right? He's not like it's a mystery why he hasn't played. He was behind Tom, and now he's behind Baker Mayfield, and those two are legitimate. Well, Tom Brady's the GOAT. And Baker Mayfield's legitimately a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL. So it would make sense that Kyle hasn't been able to see the field. I'll give him that, right? Like, I don't think he would be a terrible option off jump. It's just a super inexperienced option. And I would like Kyle Trask as a backup if you sign him to be a backup for a more established option. But if you're just signing Kyle Trask, and Kyle Trask is just slotted as your starter, I do see some issues with that. The next guy I would feel comfortable putting here, Jacoby Brissett, right? I like Jacoby Brissett. You guys know I'm a bigger fan than most of Jacoby Brissett. I think he's had a underrated career in the NFL. The problem with Jacoby Brissett is simple, though. He's not a guy who you expect to start for the whole year. Like, if Jacoby Brissett starts and finishes a year, something went wrong. He's just not designed. He's somebody you draft. He's somebody you sign because you draft somebody else. He's somebody you have to play as a placeholder. Like, he's not a legitimate year-round starting quarterback. He's never been used that way, and for good reason. While he's capable of playing good in spurts, he's not the type of quarterback that's going to be able to thrive in a 17-game season, especially if you are expecting him to do anything in the playoffs. I think Jacoby is a really serviceable backup and somebody that can be a long-term spot starter for you, but a whole season is asking a lot for Jacoby Brissett. Again, I would not mind Jacoby Brissett as a backup. I would be excited if you got Jacoby Brissett or Kyle Trask as backup quarterbacks. But if you're proposing these two as the day one, week one starter, I get a little queasy about what that means for the upcoming season. In that similar vein, let's put Daniel Jones here, right? So I would put him ahead of Jacoby Brissett. So right now, Trey Lance is the worst option, and then it goes up, right? So Daniel Jones, he started at least. There's confidence that you could get him to finish a season if you get him in the right system. He's young enough to where maybe he learned, like, you can convince yourself that this could be a Ryan Tannehill situation. I don't think it's likely that it's a Ryan Tannehill situation, but I don't think it's crazy to convince yourself that this could be a little bit of a mini Ryan Tannehill situation. He really didn't get a ton of support in New York. I don't think he was put in the best position to succeed. That being said, I don't think he was gonna succeed, even if he was put in the best position. Again, it's better than trotting out a super unproven Kyle Trask out there week one, or Jacoby Brissett, or Jimmy Garoppolo, or Mac Jones, or Cooper Rush, or Trey Lance. But it's not anything that anybody would be excited about. I would put one ahead of Daniel Jones is Justin Fields, right? And some people might be upset that I'm not ranking Justin Fields any higher. I think this is a fair place to put Justin Fields. I mean, he got benched in Pittsburgh, and the team did get better after he got benched, no matter how we want to kind of flip it and describe it, right? I know people think that Justin Fields is the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see if that's true. We'll see what Pittsburgh decides to do. But he presented a lot of issues that have popped up in his NFL career while he was in Pittsburgh. He is not able to read the middle of the field. He's not somebody who could process, difficult passing concepts and be able to execute them on time in an NFL offense on a regular basis. These are issues that I don't think are going away anytime soon for Justin Fields. It makes him a similar quarterback to Daniel Jones, where the ceiling is similar, where it's like, yeah, maybe you can get through a whole year with Justin Fields, but just how good you can be as a team with these two, it really depends on how loaded you are everywhere else. And if you're not a juggernaut around that quarterback, you risk having a losing season with these guys here. Right in front of Justin Fields is the man who took over for Justin Fields, and that's going to be Russell Wilson. Russ played better than expected the last two seasons he's played football. I think he played better than expected with Denver. He played better than expected with Pittsburgh. Russ is getting older and older, right? I think he's 36 or 37 years old. His game has heavily been based around his athletic ability. He's already lost a good chunk of that. I don't know what it turns into if he loses even more of that athletic ability. Another thing that brings Russ down to C tier, despite the fact that he played a little better than Justin Fields in the same exact situation, is also the fact that Russell Wilson's going to be expensive, right? And this is the first guy where money's going to become an issue, right? With all of these other quarterbacks, Trey Lance, dirt cheap. Cooper Rush, dirt cheap. Mac Jones, dirt cheap. Jimmy Garoppolo, dirt cheap. Kyle Trask, not going to be expensive. Jacoby Brissett, not going to be expensive. Daniel Jones, not going to be expensive. Justin Fields, probably like $5 to $8 million. Russ is going to cost you about $30 million a year if you want to go out and get him, right? I think that's where the price tag is for Russ. He's going to probably be the second most expensive free agent quarterback. And the prospect of paying Russ a contract, so guaranteeing him some money for not just this year, but money down the road, I think completely changes the math for him. I think it worked out in Pittsburgh last year because Russ was super cheap, right? And if Russ is super cheap, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're signing Russ to a multi-year contract and you're giving him 30 million a year, then all of a sudden the math changes on how attractive Russell Wilson is as a option. Now, I would put Derek Carr in between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And this is a hard one for me to rank because not Justin Fields, Derek Carr is significantly younger than some of the options that are going to pop up ahead of him. But he is going to be more expensive, right? You're going to have to trade a draft asset plus have to eat the rest of Derek Carr's contract, which is $40 million this year, $50 million next year, at least for cap space. You can renegotiate some of that or restructure some of it because a lot of that is wrapped up in his base salary. So there's some flexibility you can have with this contract. Certainly think that's part of it. Derek Carr also hasn't been the healthiest over the last couple of years, specifically missing 2 games in 2022. He was healthy in 2023 and then missed 7 games in 2024, right? So that is also a concern. He's coming off of an injury. I really would love to know what the price would be for somebody like Derek Carr because I can see that being an attractive option for the Cleveland Browns. Especially if a lot of things fall through. I do think he would be somebody who would be targeted post June 1st. So if things don't go the Browns' way in free agency or in the draft, maybe they see Derek Carr as like their top consolation prize because he is younger. You can rely on him for like a couple of years, and then you have a clear out at 2027 when all of your cap space is going to clear up. So it's not a awful option. I'm not the biggest fan of Derek Carr, so I wouldn't be super excited about it. But I could see why it would make sense for the Cleveland Browns to do something like this. Another thing to point out when it comes to Derek Carr, I know people use this as a connection to Shedeur Sanders. I thought it was a pretty fragile connection to Shedeur Sanders. The fact that Will Musgrave once was on the same team as Deion Sanders, and Deion spoke positively about it. I don't think that's a real connection to Deion Sanders or Shedeur Sanders, if I'm being honest with you. But I do think Will Musgrave has a huge connection to Derek Carr. He was the quarterback coach during the portion of Derek Carr's career where he emerged as a true starter in the NFL. And maybe he might have a higher opinion of Derek Carr and have a high opinion of what Derek Carr can achieve in this offense. And he might be willing to pound the table for him. It's not an option for the Cleveland Browns. It's just not an option that I would love. The next guy I have on this list is Cam Ward. I'm not a big fan of Cam Ward as a prospect. I've talked about this a ton. I've seen Cam Ward play in person. I've watched a ton of Cam Ward. He's just not for me. And it's important to remember that this is just my opinion, my list of what I would like based on my opinion, right? Like, so if you disagree with where I have Cam Ward here, there's no need to be angry about it. It's just my opinion here. I'm not a big fan of Cam. I don't think he's a great fit for the Cleveland Browns. I understand why people get excited about him. He does have arm talent. He makes tremendous plays every once in a while. The thing with Cam is I just don't see him translating well to the NFL. I do worry about how long he likes to hold the ball and how big of an issue that's going to be for him going forward. In my play style concerns, I don't think he can easily adjust his play style. I think he plays like that because that's how he likes to play. And I don't think he's going to change that just because he's in the NFL. I think he's going to always be some version of the guy that you saw at Miami because that's what he wants to be like or play like at the end of the day. All in all, I'm just not a big fan of Cam Ward here, but if you told me my options were like trade some draft picks and have to eat a bunch of cap space for Derek Carr or sign Russ for $30 million or something like that, I would prefer Cam Ward to that, right? So, I'm not saying Cam Ward is the worst possible option to go with at quarterback, But it's not something that I would even act like is one of my favorite options, which is, again, my opinion. If you disagree, I think that's fair, right? We'll see how this quarterback class plays out, and if I'm wrong about Cam Ward, I'll admit it. But yeah, that's just how I feel right now about Cam. Okay, let's go Aaron Rodgers. We're gonna go B tier here, right? Aaron Rodgers. Let's put him here. I understand why they would want to do it. Aaron Rodgers is still not playing terrible football. He's not who Aaron Rodgers used to be, but he's still capable of playing good football. Aaron Rodgers did play his best football in a wide zone scheme, similar to what Kevin runs. So he would be familiar with what the Browns want to do. The issue with Aaron Rodgers isn't even that he would be that expensive. He's probably going to get cut from the Jets. If the Jets move on from him, he's not going to be that expensive this free agency. If you're asking the question, why is it that I think Russ is going to be expensive in free agency, but not Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, has to do with when these guys are hitting free agency. Russ is hitting free agency on a bit of a high, right? Having his best season in quite some time, and that also being associated with the playoff run that nobody really expected the Steelers to go on, or at least an amount of games that the Steelers won that nobody really expected them to win. Their season ended rather predictably for this era of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But that's another conversation for another day. So that's why Russ is probably going to make more money in free agency than like Aaron Rodgers, who is at a perceived low point, and Kirk Cousins, who's at a perceived low point, right? Both guys, I think Aaron Rodgers almost got benched, didn't end the season well. And then Kirk Cousins did get benched. So both those guys, if they hit the market, would be vet minimum guys versus Russ, who people might spend a bit of money on. The issue with Aaron Rodgers is that he brings the baggage of being Aaron Rodgers, right? If you have anything that, like, imagine the Myles Garrett drama with like Aaron Rodgers reporting on it on Pat McAfee every week. Like, is that really what we want? It's going to be a huge distraction. Like, I think that was one of the things he did not do a great job of managing, was being a huge distraction for New York. And he's not at the point of his career where he can play so well that his distraction is worth it, right? Like, there used to be a time where he was a little bit of a distraction, but he played so well, he's worth it. As his play has gone down, his distraction level has gone up. I don't see that being a great scenario for the Cleveland Browns, if I'm being honest with you. Then I have Kyler Murray here. The reason I'm low on this isn't because I'm super low on Kyler Murray, but I just think the package you would have to put together to get Kyler Murray would have to be ridiculous, right? You're talking about a Deshaun Watson style package for a young quarterback, and I just don't think that's a good idea, if I'm being honest with you. And the Browns are the last team that needs to spend 3 first-round picks on a quarterback at this current moment. They just got their first-round picks back. They need to replenish talent around the position instead of like trying to hit a home run at the quarterback position right now, if I'm being honest with you. Like, a lot of their players that they built the core around, that they felt like they were one QB away with, are getting much older now and at the age where you have to consider a replacement. So trading 3 first-round picks to bring in a quarterback could have devastating consequences for what this team could look like in 4 or 5 years. A good quarterback, he might even be the best quarterback that the Browns have had since 1999, but he also would be an expensive quarterback. He also would be a quarterback that costs you a lot of draft assets, and a quarterback that I don't really believe is going to put you past the juggernauts in the AFC. I don't think you beat Lamar Jackson with Kyler Murray. I don't think you put yourself in a position to build a team around Kyler Murray, Philadelphia Eagles style, that could be so good around the quarterback to get you past Pat Mahomes. So both ways around Pat, I don't think that you can get with or achieve with Kyler Murray. I just don't think that's going to be something that would be good for the Browns long term. I would prefer it to Aaron Rodgers. I'm gonna be honest here. I'm kind of thinking about moving Cam Ward. Let's move Cam Ward here, because I'd be lying if I said I want the Browns to draft. I'd be lying if I said I want the Browns to trade for Kyler Murray more than I would want to just straight up draft Cam Ward, because the penalty for that I think is less severe than the penalty of selecting Kyler Murray or trading a bunch of picks for Kyler Murray. So I'm moving Cam Ward up, retcon this to B class. And right next to Cam Ward, I have my number one quarterback in this class, Shedeur Sanders. I'm not in love with Shedeur as a prospect. I have a video coming out soon about Shedeur Sanders and my final verdict on where I see him. I think Shedeur can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I just don't think Shedeur is going to be the kind of quarterback that can get you past the juggernauts in the AFC. But I do think that at least if you draft Shedeur, you're only spending one first-round pick on him, which allows you to build a team around him potentially that could elevate him past certain guys. So I don't think your future would be doomed there. I do have him above Cam Ward. I'm not a big fan of Cam Ward as a prospect. I am a much bigger fan of who Shedeur is as a prospect. So this isn't really a great reflection of how I feel about these two. But yeah, if you were to draft one quarterback, you take Shedeur Sanders. That is better than like a lot of the options that you have presented to yourself. All but 4 options, I think, that have been presented to the Cleveland Browns. So I would certainly understand if the Browns took a quarterback at 2. Me personally would prefer they wouldn't do it, would prefer they go a different way or pursue different options other than trying to draft Shedeur here, because I think it's possible that you could take best player available in this year's class and at worst get a player or prospect at quarterback around Shedeur's caliber in the first round of next year's draft, whether you're in the mid or late part of the first round or the early part of the first round, where I do think you could get a better prospect than Shedeur, right? Like if we're taking a swing at quarterback, me personally, I want to maximize the level of prospect that I would get. And Shedeur's just, he's not a great prospect. He's just a good one. But if the Browns took him at 2, I know some people think I would be ranting and furious and cussing people out. I don't prefer it. But if they took Shedeur at 2, I wouldn't be upset. And hell, even if they took Cam Ward, I would understand why they did it, right? Like there's not much the Browns can do at quarterback that would make me furious, because I understand they're in a no-win situation right now, where it's going to be very hard to win, given that Deshaun has imploded as quickly as Deshaun has imploded. All right, and then the option I do have over drafting a quarterback is Kirk Cousins. And look, Kirk Cousins, he's old. He did not play well at the end of Atlanta. That might have had to do something with an injury that he had in Week 10 versus the Saints. But what Kirk Cousins is potentially is cheap and allows you to be flexible for the 2026 draft, where I do think that you're going to have a better chance of getting a quarterback with a higher ceiling than what you have right now with the number 2 overall pick in next year's first round. So Kirk Cousins, he's good enough to make sure you can be competitive now. I think him and Kevin's offense, that will be fine. But also, you don't lock yourself into anything long-term with him. So you're not going to be held up cap-wise. He's going to come in for the vet minimum if he gets released from Atlanta, which a lot of people expect to happen because it makes a lot of sense for Atlanta to cut him. He would be cheap. He would be serviceable. I think he could start for you for a whole year. And I think if you have a good team around Kirk, you can win games with Kirk Cousins and have a fun season while also keeping an eye on your future, with maybe Myles Garrett being dangled as a trade piece in 2026 to get you another first-round pick in that year's draft, so you can bundle that to get the quarterback that you really want. Or with that class being projected to be a little bit deeper than this year's class is, you might be able to get that quarterback with wherever your natural pick lays. Either way, it allows you to be flexible at the quarterback position, which I think will be better for the team long term, right? He's a good short-term option. He's no strings attached. That's why I think Kirk Cousins makes a ton of sense here for the Cleveland Browns, and I prefer it over drafting a quarterback this year simply because I'm not the highest on this year's quarterback draft class. Let's go to A tier here, or no, actually, let's go B tier here. I think Sam Darnold belongs in B tier. I don't think I would put him in A tier because I don't think it solves the quarterback problem. I think there are huge question marks about Sam Darnold. And I would actually put Sam Darnold behind Kirk Cousins if I'm being honest, because Kirk is cheap. Kirk is a known entity. Kirk is somebody who's experienced and doing exactly what Kevin wants to do. And Kirk comes with no strings attached. Sam Darnold's going to come with a new giant contract. He's going to come with some strings attached. Now, you can structure that contract so you have it out after 2 years, but it's still a 2-year commitment. And Kirk is not the known entity that, not Kirk. Sam is not the known entity that Kirk Cousins is, which means that there's no guarantee that Sam Darnold plays at the same quality that he did in Minnesota. I understand that Sam is younger, but I think there is a bigger flop potential with Sam Darnold than there is with Kirk, given that Kirk is coming back to a system where he is very familiar with. Sam Darnold would be coming to a new system, even though it has some similarities to what Minnesota does. And I think it would kind of give you a commitment, right? I think it's similar to drafting a quarterback, where if you do sign Sam Darnold to a significant enough deal, you are saying that you're not going to draft a quarterback at least in 2026, right? So you're making a commitment there. So I would have Sam right there with drafting a quarterback, and then Kirk, because of the flexibility and the no strings attached to bringing him on, that's why I would favor Kirk there. All right, let's talk about the options you can get that I think would solve your problem and allow you to have flexibility over the next 2 years. Quarterbacks who give you a legitimate chance to play in the playoffs while also allowing you to solve this problem long term. Geno Smith doesn't look like he's going to be available. It looks like Seattle is very intent on keeping him. But if he does become available and you can get a solid offer for him, I think he would make a ton of sense here for Cleveland. His contract doesn't lock you into a long-term deal. I don't think the trade for him would have to include a Kyler Murray-sized amount of assets because he's not under control for a very long time under contract. He's going to be a free agent next offseason. So this would be like a rental, right? So you're talking about a third or, maybe a third and a fifth round pick to pick up a dude like Geno. So the price tag wouldn't be tremendous. His cap hit's not going to be crazy, and he would offer you flexibility, and he's a better player than what Kirk Cousins is, and a younger player than what Kirk is. Like, you will feel pretty good about the next 2 years, and this will give you flexibility not only to look at what the 2026 class is going to be, which could be good, but also it would give you enough time to reach into that 2027 class potentially, which I am pretty sure is going to be good, more so than the 2026 class. So it gives you that flexibility. I would be excited if they got Geno Smith because I think that gives the Browns a lifeline to solve this quarterback problem long term. And then Matt Stafford, I think, is the best possible option for the Cleveland Browns. There's no doubt about it to me. He's experienced in what the Browns want to do. He is older than Kirk Cousins, but he has played better recently than Kirk Cousins has. Even up until his elimination against the Philadelphia Eagles, he was the only quarterback in the playoffs to have a solid game against Philly's defense. So that tells you how high level of football that Matt Stafford is playing. Now, he is going to be available, or at least they're making it seem like he's going to be available. We'll see if they actually pull the trigger on a trade for Matt Stafford. But I think it's obvious that he would be the best option, probably be the only guy you could trade for that would make Miles at least want to see what's up for this year or maybe even a year after that. So maybe you get Miles to play out his contract here, potentially sign an extension, which would be great. Like Matt Stafford, best possible option for the Cleveland Browns. Geno Smith is a close second, but I don't think he's going to be available. This is how I would rank it. Again, there's nobody in S tier because there's no franchise quarterback that's available for you this offseason. But there's a lot of guys that you could get here that would be stopgap. So this is where I'm at this offseason. This is where I'm ranking the options. So if you're looking at this, I have Matt Stafford, Geno Smith. That's my tier 1. And then tier 2 would be like Kirk Cousins, and then slightly behind that, drafting a quarterback or signing Sam Darnold long term. And then options I just straight up don't like: Kyler Murray, trading a bunch of picks for him; Aaron Rodgers, I get why you would want to do it; trading for Derek Carr and his big contract; Russell Wilson, signing him to a big deal, would not love that; Justin Fields, and hoping that he kind of turns into something that he has not been over his NFL career; crossing your fingers and hoping for Daniel Jones, I don't think it's a great idea. Jacoby Brissett and Kyle Trask would love him as backups, would not love him as your day one starter. Jimmy Garoppolo, we know what Jimmy is at this point. Mac Jones, Trey Lance, Cooper Rush, again, all not exciting options. But that's where I would rank them. Where would you rank these guys in these options? Let me know in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.